All right. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Bracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashadyadi Satarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right.
Cool. Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for our first Bhakti Yoga London program for this new year. Hope you all had a good break, and it's lovely to see you all. I can see there's a few of you joining us on the Facebook live streams. Have any questions? Please type it on there, and we're more than happy to take any questions from Facebook. Similarly, those of you that have joined us on Zoom, either feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions. If you're not comfortable of us in asking questions live, do feel free to pop it on the chat, and more than happy to pick up questions that way. So this is actually the third session of this series that we're looking to explore Krishna's pastimes. So all of Krishna's activities are called pastimes. And during the previous two sessions, we've explored the idea of Shrashti Leela and the physical, as in material manifestation. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, Keshav Madhav Prabhu, that today we're going to look at the time factor or the Kāla-śakti in a little bit more detail, because we didn't really have the time last time to dwell into it. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Keshav Madhav Prabhu, who's going to take us through the session today. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Dee. Yes, as usual, let's have a short review on the previous session. We heard about the spiritual manifestations and went from there to what is called the primary creation in the scriptures like the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Brahma Samhita, which are rich of information regarding the Shrishti Leela, or the pastime of creation. We find, particularly in the Brahma Samhita, a particular structure that I wanted to follow. Means in the beginning, the spiritual manifestations were described. We heard about that actually the center of the spiritual world, or Vaikuntha, is Goloka Vrindavan in form of a unlimited lotus, which has unlimited lotus petals, and in the center of that lotus, Radha, Krishna are being situated, and then around them also all the associates like the gopis and so on. And from there, the lotus expands. There are so many areas. There's then Mathura Dham, Dwaraka Dham, then there comes also Ayodhya, all these different areas of the spiritual world where Krishna also takes different forms. We heard about, again, a bit of the Vishnu Tattva in connection to Krishna, that there are differences in the qualities and appearance of the different forms of Krishna, and that the forms who take care of the creation are the Vishnu forms, the four-handed forms. And we came to hear a bit more about the first Purusha avatar, the first Vishnu form that starts the material creation, which is called Mahavishnu or Karanodakashya Vishnu. We heard about his residence on the Viraj river, or the causal ocean. There was a description in the Krishna book where Krishna and Arjuna were visiting him. We heard about that. And that this Mahavishnu is manifesting the universes in their subtle form out of his skin pores. We discussed a bit the size of a universe in relationship to the skin pore of Mahavishnu. There were quite some numbers with the diameter of the Earth. I don't have the numbers on my head now, but there were quite some numbers. The universe, is said, has a 4 billion diameter, and then plus the layers that surround it, and so on and so on. So we got a bit of a sense of the size of Mahavishnu. That's why he's called Mahavishnu. Maha means great or very big, large. So this Vishnu is so big we can't even comprehend it. So we heard how he, by his glands, activates the material energy, that he is the one who transforms the Brahman energy into what is called Mahatattva, or material energy. And that also one of the energies that is employed while he is looking or glancing at material nature is Kāla-śakti, the time factor, the energy that we will explore again more today. And so we heard already a bit how Kāla-śakti is actually a very crucial force or element within the material creation. And it also makes the main difference between the spiritual spheres, Vaikuntha, and the non-spiritual spheres, which is Devidam, or like the material energy. Vaikuntha means without fear, and this is to one part, simply there's no time, there's no destruction, everything is eternal. Whereas in the material world, everything is governed by time. So time is the cause of fear in the material world, and also Krishna declares himself in the Bhagavad Gita. He says in the 11th chapter also, time I am destroyer of the worlds. So speaking of time, I would like to add to the Mahavishnu description. We heard about the size last time. What we didn't cover is interesting detail about his breath. We discussed also that we can meditate on Krishna in relationship or connected to our own body. We also breathe. We also have a skin that transforms elements, of course, not in a very sublime way, but that we can see that he's the original, that by his breathing simply, he manifests universes, he transforms energies, like, so we also transform oxygen into CO2 and so on. Our skin manifests certain secretions. They're not, as I said, not so sublime, but simply that the fact they do manifesting. So we can have also some contemplation in this regard to compare our, let's say, perverted form of body and personality to what Vishnu is doing in the original pure sense. So in this way, also moving a bit closer to Vishnu in understanding by, connecting in this way that Vishnu is doing that even while asleep. Our focus, or my focus, is to point out how all the creation activities are a pastime. Therefore, Krishna in no way are they exhausting or take a lot of endeavor or work. He's doing that playfully. He's situated in a transcendental slumber called Yoga Nidra, so he's not unconscious. And this relates interestingly to the whole, how to say, purpose of the material world, because what we do as spiritual souls, that's the Vedic version, we actually go asleep here. We dream the dream of a material existence, but we are actually very unconscious. We forgot our spiritual identity, and we dream the dream of a material existence. So Vishnu, interestingly, seems to relate to that by putting himself in a position where he's apparently sleeping. All right, so when he's breathing, it said the universes are exhaled, they come out of his skin pores, and we also described that they expand to some degree. And then when he inhales again, they also get smaller a bit. First, they have the shape of a small golden egg. That is how it is described. And then gradually the 5 main elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, they surround the universes. And within the Mahatattva, they're being nourished. The Mahatattva is like a fertilizer and nourishes these elements so that they grow, actually, and also the elemental shapes around that, which is in itself a very fascinating thing. Srila Prabhupada also describes them as like an egg cell, in a sense, like compares the inner space of the universe to a womb, and where then later the second Vishnu, Garbhodakasya Vishnu, enters. And there also the word Garbhodaka means birth, or like he says, relates to the womb in which birth takes place. And that also there later Brahma is being manifested from Garbhodakasya Vishnu. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find also many concrete numbers in regards to when something happens in the creation, durations, for example. So there's also the lifespan of Lord Brahma. And it said 1 breath of Mahavishnu constitutes the lifespan of Brahma. There's even a Sanskrit number, I forgot it now. It's less than a second. This is said how long for Mahavishnu the life of Brahma is. He experiences this as less than a second, in a transcendental time sense. And so Brahma's age is calculated as follows. This is to be found in the Bhagavad Gita, also in the 8th chapter, verse 17. There it is said that there are 4 yugas, like 4 seasons within a year. So we can compare it like that. The Satya Yuga at the beginning, then comes the Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. That's like the winter. And he is, or we are now in the winter season, Kali Yuga. And Satya is the longest age. Kali is in duration the shortest age. They all together constitute a time span of 4,320,000 years. And it said this times 1,000 is like this is one kalpa, this four yugas together from kalpa. This times 1,000 constitutes 1 day of Brahma. So take 4,320,000 years times 1,000. This is how long 1 day of Brahma lasts. And then there's a night followed by that being as long. So 1,000 kalpas a day, 1,000 kalpas a night, and then 30 of that in 1 month, 12 in a year. And Brahma also has a lifespan of 100 years. And we have a concrete number. This is also mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. So his full lifespan adds up to a total of 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years. So this is how long 1 breath of Mahavishnu takes. So there we have another amazing aspect of how we can meditate on Krishna in his activities in regards to.
Sorry to disturb you, Prabhu.
Sure.
So you said that, so 1 breath of Vishnu, so you said 300 million, some trillion. Is that, did you say the lifetime of Brahma? Or
Yeah, that's the full lifespan, the full 100 years. Lasts as long as 1 breath of Mahavishnu.
Of Mahavishnu, okay. And that includes the 1,000 kalpas you said of day and 1,000 kalpas of night.
Yes. So the kalpas, yeah, sure, no problem. I can say it again. The kalpas relate, 1,000 kalpas constitute 1 day of Brahma. So 4,320,000 years times 1,000 is 1 day. As long, there's also a night of Brahma. So, and then of Brahma's also month has 30 days. Brahma's year also has 12 months. And he turns 100 years old before he dies. And the total number of years of Brahma's life is 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years. And this is how long one breath of Mahavishnu takes. Yes. All right. So there we have a bit of a, how to say, more information on how this pastime is happening. So for Vishnu, things what for us is very long, for Vishnu is very short. In fact, for him, there is even no time. That's something very difficult to comprehend. And today we will discuss the time factor. And also in philosophy, in the realization theory, like with Immanuel Kant, for example, he also established that when we think of things, we have to have already a concept of time and space. It's also said space-time, that is forming the basis of it. As soon as I speak of an activity, I must already speak of some beginning, then something that happens, and an end. So our language is conditioned like that. Our thinking is conditioned like that. We always have a timeline for everything. We cannot imagine something without a given timeline, past, present, future. It's a precondition. Let's say like space. I cannot think something without having already a space provided in which that whatever thing happens. Of course, I can imagine that the space is relatively empty. Some try to meditate on nothing, but it's not possible. Even this nothing, one has to accommodate in something, in a given idea of space. So it's not possible. If someone tells you think of nothing, you should tell this person that this person is crazy. You cannot think of nothing. You can try to think of as less as possible, but there's something you got to think about. And this is space also within your mind. So these conditions are there, and therefore it is very difficult for a conditioned soul to grasp a concept of eternity. Eternity means there's no beginning in time, and so therefore is also no end. We tend to think, and we think of time of a beginning with a rather no ending, but there's a beginning and an indefinite period of time. This is usually when we think of eternity. But for us, it's not possible to assume something has no beginning. So therefore, we spoke about that last time. Our tradition is not so much focusing on try to understand with your intellect. Of course, to some degree, we should, because our intellect has capacity to understand things. But in the first place, it is about dedicating and devoting yourself to the path of spirituality, which is being made successful. The ultimate success is also what Krishna tells to Brahma in Srimad Bhagavatam, is the revelation of the spiritual sphere, the revelation of the form of God, the revelation of us seeing our spiritual self. It's revealed to us. It's not something that we earn by a certain amount of activities or work. It's something where Krishna really has to lift, so to say, the curtain of a material energy and show us, because we have original transcendental senses which are at the moment not available to us. So therefore, let's not be discouraged if we cannot fully comprehend or understand timeless or eternal things. Let's rather focus that these things can be shown to us when we please Vishnu with the sincere desire that we want to see again. Because sleeping also means you close your eyes, literally when you sleep, and you close your eyes, and this also can be an effort to also disconnect from your environment. You want to sleep, you want to have a break. So, and you forget, Srila Prabhupada also says, and what is happening when we sleep? We completely forget our even physical identity. In a dream, you can dream of something which has nothing to do with your present situation. And then when you wake up again, you come back and you realize, oh yeah, I am this and this person and this house and this city and so on. To me also a few times it happened, was not very pleasant, that I had sleeping periods where then I woke up and I had really no clue where I am and why. That was a very unpleasant situation. So, but it's true, when we sleep, we completely forget, we can completely disconnect. And as said, the material world that we are in is an attempt also, or like brings with it, that we completely disconnect from our spiritual nature and we require an awakening. So that's the idea. And the person who keeps us also in sleep, one of the energies, that's the Kāla-śakti that we mentioned. So we want to hear more about her today. And I'm going to share, I found some good illustrations I'm going to share with you. Just give me a second. So there we have one image of Kāla-śakti. Interesting is that also all the energies of Krishna, it is said they always have a personal form, representation. They're not just impersonal energies, they're all personalized. So it's said this energy is employed by Krishna to actually manifest the material nature. So when Vishnu looks at the Mahatattva, the ingredient, which is compared like a cloud that covers the spiritual sky to some degree. And it said first, the material energy is very subtle and loose. Material energy is a passive state, and the active energy is actually the spirit soul or Krishna or Vishnu. So these are, this is the relationship. Matter is also, it's considered dead. It has no life in itself, and it has to be animated by a higher energy that is alive. So we see that also in chemistry a bit. Maybe if you remember that periodical system, all this whole arrangement where you see all the existing elements in the world, and some of them, there are also documentaries about that. Like they said, two of these elements actually do not really exist; they only exist theoretically. And it is said why? Because they're so highly radioactive that they actually, as soon as they start to manifest, they fall apart again. So this shows a bit about the nature of matter. Even the smallest units of matter, which are atoms, also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the word atom is also used. Of course, an atom, there are some neutrons and all that. So these things, they don't have initiative by themselves. So matter, in order to be stable, must be provided with some force that it sticks together. So it's also described in the Brahma Samhita that Mahavishnu, by his glance, which is one primary by the time factor or Kāla-śakti, this force is being provided, that matter starts to manifest, is being pulled together, so that it becomes somewhat stable, or we would say manifest. Otherwise, if this force would be withdrawn, this would just completely simply fall apart, because it has no strength by itself. So that's something to contemplate. So Kāla-śakti is doing that. And I said first, Mahavishnu is looking at that, and Kāla-śakti is doing the work, but also Vishnu's glance, as said, is also an element for itself, which also gives the finishing touch at the end when the elements are fully manifest. So different states. One state is called pradhan, which is a very subtle state of matter. And then there's prakriti, when it is manifested into tangible elements. So, and according to whatever report you read in the Bhagavatam, there might be a bit slightly different variation of terms. But so therefore, it goes slowly from subtle to gross. And it's also time is being measured. This in the 5th canto, we find that by the duration one atom takes to unite with another. So this is and then from there on, in the Sanskrit language, there's a whole chain of how certain time units are being presented, but essentially it is like how long does one atom take to unite with another. And we also see that time is being experienced differently within the universe. And this has also to do that there are different levels of condensation of matter. We can hear in the earthly field where we have very gross bodies, matter is very thick, or we say condensed, whereas in higher spheres, matter is less condensed, it's very subtle. So the distance also between atoms is bigger. So that's at least the logic that I come up with, so to bit understand the time differences. So in Kāla-śakti is not just the force who combines the matter. It is also described by Kapila-dev in the 3rd canto, that she is the one who stimulates us, the living entities, to act in the material world. We have material desires, they are stored within our material body. And I said it is Kāla-śakti who animates again the living entities to act according to those desires. And maybe we can see in our lives that we have also a certain sense of urgency often, because we know our lifespan is limited, or we see our bodies growing or time is passing. And classical thing is a so-called midlife crisis, where people take a review, a certain time has passed, and there's an urge to either accomplish something or like again establish new goals, or to get out of an old situation and whatever. So there is an urge to act, and you cannot resist it. And this is Kāla-śakti actually mixed with the material energy, of course, to urge us. Or sometimes it's said for women, they have the so-called biological clock. They feel an urge to bear a child and so on. Also for men, it could be the one to be father. So we see there's some examples where we see that there is a desire and then an urge, also based on time, to realize those desires. So it said Kāla-śakti is the force that manages that. And yes, as I said, the material energy consists of 23 elements. They are listed in the senses and the sense objects and so on. I don't go into all the details. And I said the time factor, depending on what list you see, is sometimes the 24th or 25th item also that is belonging to the material energy. Yes. So more elaborate explanations you find in the Srimad Bhagavatam, also in the 3rd canto, 11th chapter, but also in the 5th canto, I think 20th chapter, 21st. Yes, and Kapiladev also says because he's speaking a lot in this 3rd canto, he discusses the Sankhya philosophy to a great extent. He's saying that the time factor is experienced based on the false ego. It said for those who would be free from material identification, they don't experience time, which makes sense because which is logical, because if you're connected with the eternity of the Atma, time becomes irrelevant. Time is only relevant in regards to the material body, which is governed by time. So if a spiritualist on his path progresses, gradually, he also becomes free from the influence of time, since he loses identification with the body. The body, of course, at some point still goes, but the person is not affected by the change. This is also said in the Bhagavad Gita to be one achievement one should aim for. I said, Dehinosmin yata dehe kamaram yavanam chara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuhyate. Krishna says that Dehinosmin, the embodied soul, travels like in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, gives up this body, accepts a new one, and it said a sober person, Dhiras tatra namuhyate, Dhira is not bewildered by such a change. And that means this person has understood that what changes is not me, that what changes is my body. I stay constant. And so therefore there's no identification anymore with the time factor as well. And this is something important to understand, that our fear of death is provided by the time factor, but it works only as long as we have a mature body where we can be afraid of losing it. Of course, it's easier said than done. It's a lifetime task to gradually develop that consciousness. So therefore, it's important to have a serious spiritual practice. It doesn't come by itself. One aspect is it, that's why we also do that, is to hear Krishna Katha, because in the 2nd canto, in the 3rd chapter, verse 17, it is said that the sun is also a manifestation of the time factor. We will hear more about that later. And by rising and setting takes away the life of everyone, except those who utilize the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. So for those who spend their time with Krishna Katha or spiritual activities, they more or less they become more and more immune to the effects of time, because they connect to the eternity. Someone, okay, maybe we can ask that. Like the Bhagavad Gita has 5 topics, right? And one of the 5 topics is exactly Kāla-śakti, the time factor. We know that there's Atma as one topic, Ishvara means soul and God, then Prakriti, material nature, Karma, activities, and then there's time factor. Does anyone know where do we find actually the time factor in the Bhagavad Gita? Where is it? Where is it? Hidden. It's not so easy because it's not so obvious. There's no chapter called Kāla-śakti or something, or like Kala Yoga or something. It's actually in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where the universal form is being discussed, and we hear that Arjuna attains what I mentioned before. He attains a revelation of that time factor. Krishna blesses him by giving him divine eyes so that he can see Krishna's so-called material form, the Virat Rupa, the universal form, in which a time factor is essential. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes that there are two sections. Give me a second. I always is the same thing with this. Yes, that's one thing we can hear later again. He says the time factor is being discussed. Secondly, that Krishna actually decided when he says, I show Krishna this form of mine, he spends 3 verses on showing him Mahavishnu as the super soul of matter. So first Arjun gets an insight on how is Vishnu related to this material world. And then from the verses 21 to 31 in the 11th chapter, Kāla-śakti, the time factor, is mentioned. This is how Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is explaining this to us. And he says, as we saw shortly before, that actually Mahavishnu controls the material energy from inside as the super soul and from the outside as time factor. So these two are say doing the same job from different sides, so to speak. We hear it's not that Vishnu is only the one who creates and Kāla-śakti is taking it away. No, Vishnu is and Kāla-śakti relate to the how to say, the handcraftsman and his tool. Time is one tool in the hands of Krishna. With this he destroys. And the super soul is also described in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that he is the developer of all, but also he devours all. So from him both comes creation and destruction, is both arranged by Vishnu. When he creates, Lord Brahma is involved, and also Kāla-śakti is involved by creation. And when he destroys, Shiva is involved, and the Kāla-śakti, this time energy. This is described by Kapila-dev also in the 3rd canto. And I would like to read to you a bit the revelation of Arjuna to Krishna, unless we have already so far some questions or comments. All right. Then I proceed with the reading, and we can at any time also have discussion. So, as we hear, first 10 to 13 are the verses describing Vishnu, and it said here, Arjuna saw in that universal form unlimited mouths, unlimited eyes, unlimited wonderful visions. The form was decorated with many celestial ornaments and bore many divine upraised weapons. He wore celestial garlands and garments, and many divine scents were smeared over his body. All was wondrous, brilliant, unlimited, all expanding. If hundreds of thousands of suns were to rise at once into the sky, their radiance might resemble the effulgence of the Supreme Person in that universal form. At that time, Arjuna could see in the universal form of the Lord the unlimited expansions of the universe situated in one place, although divided into many, many thousands. These verses certainly are also meant for contemplation. Hearing them once is already something you might ponder and contemplate. Bhagavad Gita, as many other books, is meant to being read repeatedly, so that one can actually start to think deeper about it, truly contemplate, and ultimately meditate on what is happening there. Arjuna has in this 11th chapter a profound realization of Krishna in the form of the super soul, and he sees things that are materially contradicting, that although everything is widespread and at different places in this universal form, he could see it all at once united within the body of the super soul. So and then we go to verse 11:21. And then there are 10 shlokas. They describe now what is actually the time factor. And here Arjuna is seeing the following. All the hosts of demigods are surrendering before you and entering into you. Some of them, very much afraid, are offering prayers with folded hands. Hosts of great sages and perfected beings, crying, all peace, are praying to you by singing the Vedic hymns. So we hear again the time factor brings with it a very fearful mood, a very destructive mood. All the various manifestations of Lord Shiva, the Adityas, the Vasus, the Satyas, the Vishvedevas, and the two Ashvis, the Maruts, the forefathers, the Gandharvas, the Yakshas, the Asuras, and the perfected demigods are beholding you in wonder. Almighty Armed One, all the planets with their demigods are disturbed at seeing your great form, with its many faces, eyes, arms, thighs, legs, and bellies, and your many terrible teeth. And as they are disturbed, so am I. Arjuna became increasingly disturbed by seeing all that. O all-pervading Vishnu, seeing you with your many radiant colors touching the sky, your gaping mouth and your great glowing eyes, my mind is perturbed by fear. I can no longer maintain my steadiness or equilibrium of mind. O Lord of Lords, O refuge of the worlds, please be gracious to me. I cannot keep my balance, seeing thus your blazing death-like faces and awful teeth. In all directions I am bewildered. All the sons of Dhritarashtra, along with their allied kings and Bhishma, Drona, Karna, and our chief soldiers also, are rushing into your fearful mouth. And some I see trapped with heads smashed between your teeth. So quite a gruesome scene. As the many waves of the rivers flow into the ocean, so do all these great warriors enter blazing into your mouth. I see all people rushing full speed into your mouth as moths, oh my God, it's difficult English. These insects dash to destruction in a blazing fire. O Vishnu, I see you devouring all people from all sides with your flaming mouths, covering all the universe with your effulgence. You are manifest with terrible, scorching rays. O Lord of Lords, so fierce and of form, please tell me who you are. I offer my obeisances unto you. Please be gracious to me. You are the primal Lord. I want to know about you, for I do not know what your mission is. And then actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, starts to speak. And so we got some, some glimpse into what happened to Arjuna on this battlefield of Kurukshetra, and he saw Kāla-śakti as an energy or aspect of the super soul. So it is always described that, of course, the Lord employs all his energies. He does nothing really himself. And one of the energies he employs is the time factor. All right. Again, let's give some opportunity in case there are some comments or questions regarding that.
So probably just as usual, I've got so many questions. Sorry, but when the verses we just read, is that description of different aspects of the Kāla-śakti that he saw, or is it because I know that we say that Krishna is good and the bad, everything, good and bad that happens, they're all aspects of Krishna, and we need to accept the good and the bad because they're all part and parcel of Krishna. Is that what the verse is referring to, or is it specifically that time factor / that those verses were going into?
Yes, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur explains that in this chapter what happens that Krishna intends to show Arjuna his Vishnu form and his time factor energy. He says first, I will show him the Vishnu form and then the Kāla-śakti as an energy. So Krishna wanted, actually Arjuna was asking for that form in the first place. Like many personalities also in the Bhagavatam, they show curiosity in regards to the material energy, like Markandeya Rishi, for example. You find him in the 11th or no, 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He witnessed practically a whole devastation. He could survive that and stay there, and then Krishna passes by on a little green leaf as a baby Krishna with the toe in his mouth. And Markandeya Rishi got inhaled by Vishnu through the nostril within the body of Mahavishnu, and also exhaled again. So to witness everything what happens inside and outside the Vishnu form. And here Arjuna specifically witnessed the time factor. And important is to understand the time factor as an aspect or like an energy intrinsically connected to the Paramatma. Vishnu is governing the universe by creating it with the help of time and also destroying it with the help of time. So it's just a different, so to say, side or aspect of the same thing. And Arjuna saw them here as connected. First he saw Vishnu as a super soul, and then the tool of Vishnu, so to speak, the Kāla-śakti. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then I would say let's go to another part of it. Later on, we also discuss today the some connections between the Vedic creation reports and the judeo-christian creation reports. Since we spoke of time, we shortly mentioned it already, that there is also the sun, which is an embodiment also again of Vishnu and also again an embodiment of time. It said the sun is similarly, the sun is considered the king of planets within the universe. It is situated, there are three worlds mentioned in the Vedic cosmology. It's a quite complex thing, but let's have it very simplistically explained. There's a lower planetary system, or like subterranean to the Earth. There's some spheres, and then there's then the earthly region, then the heavenly region. And between the earthly region and the heavenly region, there's what we call outer space. And it said there the sun is situated as the actually central planet of the universe, distributing light and heat to everything. And through the sun, which is considered Vishnu himself as Surya Narayan. Surya is the sun god, Narayan, the Vishnu feature or aspect. And also the sun is destroying, as we heard before, it's taking also the duration. And there's a very interesting description, or actually two, one in the 5th and one in the 12th canto, about that Surya Narayan and what happens as when he travels. As we mentioned before, like Krishna is also a person, all his energies are personified, and everything he does has a pastime character. He's always having he's always in an enjoyer mood, enjoys activities. Nothing is only just technical or impersonal. So we find also, I found a picture that I would like to share with you. So I hope now I tap the right screen here. So we have that. Yes, Surya Narayan. It is said that all the other demigods, because Surya is counted among the demigods, all the others have been appointed to their posts by Vishnu, like the Earth, planet, Moon, Venus, and so on. Only the predominating deity of the sun, Surya Narayan, is an incarnation, or actually, correctly speaking, expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we see here the illustration shows him sitting on, which is supposed to be a chariot. And of course, there's a driver, there are 7 horses. And it is said Surya Narayan is sitting on that chariot, and there's a personality called Aruna Dev. He's the one who is the driver. And let me just shortly go to the... yeah. Yes, Arunadev is holding the reins for the horses, and he is driving the chariot. And this is called, it is always on a circle within the universe, and this is called Kāla-śakti, the different color chakras or time spheres in which the sun also moves. So we see again an intrinsic connection to time. And it says the sun is also controlling also the movements of all the other planets. And there's some reports saying there are 6 categories of companions to the sun god. Some say 7. So let's put them together. So what happens is there's another expansion of a sun god present next to Surya Narayan. He also, of course, has his Lakshmi Devi expansion in form of Savitri Devi, which is not on this illustration, but there are others where she is. And there are, of course, always rishis or sages there who chant Vedic hymns, offer prayers. There are apsaras, which are heavenly dancers or dancing women, and they offer their praise by dancing very gracefully, beautifully, and Gandharvas, who are heavenly singers and musicians who divinely play instruments and sing. And then there are also creatures which usually fall in the category of demoniac, but they're also there. They're called rakshasas. There's actually man-eating, flesh-eating, powerful demons who are shapeshifters. They can assume different forms. They are yakshas and so-called nagas. Naga means snake-like beings. They're situated in the lower regions of the universe. They are also there, and it said they are responsible. I forgot in English how it's called, when the horses are being, dressed, or like when the reins are being put on. The yakshas are doing the reins themselves, are arranged by the nagas. And since the rakshasas are very powerful beings, they actually push the cart where the sun globe is situated on. They push it from behind, and then there are 7 horses in front who pull the chariot. They also have names like Gayatri, Prihati, Ushnik, Jagati, Trishtup, Anushtup, and Pankti. So they're all described, and they they pull the chariot where Surya Narayan is sitting, and in front there is an assembly of particular Brahmin sages. Brahmins are the priests or the pious people within the society, and they're called the Valhakilyas, and they also chant beautiful hymns and prayers or mantras that reveal the identity and glories of Surya Narayan. And the special thing is about them, all of them there are only as they have the size of a thumb. They're very, very small, tiny sages, and 60,000 of them are there, and some demigods also perform some rituals of glorification. And so there's a whole procedure with a lot of pomp and many, it's a very celebrative event when then Surya Narayan travels with the sun globe on the chariot in his Kāla-śakti. And there's described, he has different speeds. There's that middle, slow and fast that depends on for once in what star sign he is, if he's close to the, how you say in English, equator, to different cosmological aspects. Also the directions matter. So according to that, he can be a bit slower or faster, but there are concrete numbers. He says he travels an average speed of 43,530,240 kilometers per hour. So it's quite a speed. Of course, we must also understand the dimensions of the chariot. Of course, it's amazing. It said the circle, the kilometers. Now I have here the number, but I don't even know if I can pronounce it properly in English. It's again trillions and billions of kilometers that he travels in that speed, circling one day. So there are also particular measurements are given in the Srimad Bhagavatam of that chariot. So, and this Surya Narayan is also a manifestation of the time factor, giving life and also taking life, so to speak. And this is a wonderful pastime. I think also one can meditate. Always when we see the sun in the sky, sometimes it might be cloudy. Okay, we only see the light that comes through the clouds. But particularly if you see the sun itself and see how it travels from east to west and so on, we might have in mind what happens there according to the Bhagavatam. You know, that there's so many personalities involved. Monthly, they're also being interchanged, different categories of people that surround accompany Surya Narayan. And there's always a big festival practically when the sun travels its orbit. So it's also something very amazing about this whole Vaishnav theology, philosophy. All right. Okay, again, a moment for if someone has comments or questions. Maybe also, yeah, on the Facebook, I don't know, there's nothing on the Facebook, I assume.
No, we've got a few people watching us, so if anybody wants to quickly type any questions you may have, feel free, because I'm kind of looking at there's 5 people watching it, but probably lost like me, frantically scribbling. We've got a question on Zoom.
Yeah, where's the speed written in the Srimad Bhagavatam? The speed is in the 5th canto, 21st chapter, text 7 and 12. It's a few times mentioned, but the 21st chapter of the 5th canto is describing it's also that the chapter is entitled, I think, the sun's orbit or something, and then there's also time factor in general. Yes, so speaking of all the destructive aspects of time, let's also connect a bit to the judeo-christian creation reports. I don't know, maybe some of you have a background of coming from a Christian tradition, leave alone what particular tradition, or Jewish tradition, and have some connection to also the Old Testament. It's structured like that. For those who don't know, like in the beginning, in the Old Testament, we have a few books, I think 4 or 5 of Moses. And the first book is called Genesis, which is the creation. And we have a few chapters. It's rather, compared to the Vedic creation reports, it's a very small text. At times, I would call it cryptic. Means there's some message in there, but it's very short. In the Vedas, we have that. This is called a sutra. We have also the whole Vedanta Sutra, which is a comment on a large text, but it's kind of comprised, or like how to say, it's made smaller, compact. So someone who has the context knowledge of the bigger text can easily read in the small text way more than a person who does not. So essentially, if we read the creation report of the Genesis with the context of Vedic knowledge, we can actually see much more, I would say, or like connect it differently. Right after the creation, it happens very quick in the Old Testament. God comes to a point where he wants to annihilate the creation. So he creates it. It's at first all is good, but then what happens is human beings don't develop that what is called evil. Apparently, to the Bible, God did not foresee that, or he did not anticipate that something that could happen, which leaves or begs the question: how can he be omniscient or all-knowing? Right, that would be a bit, because I like also to point out, in one sense, the similarities, but also the differences in the theology we find in different religions, because it matters. You should also, examine all these things rather critically or philosophically, if they are consistent, if it makes sense what is being said there. So perhaps then we start with shortly with the creation and come to then the destruction, which links us again to the time factor as we just heard it now. The Genesis starts with a set in the beginning when God creates the universe, the earth was formless and desolate. The raging ocean that covered everything was engulfed in total darkness, and the Spirit of God was moving over the water. We haven't covered yet the secondary creation. We mentioned some things, like that Garbhodakasha Vishnu is there and then lays on the ocean, and Brahma is being born out of the lotus navel. If we take this report, we can link it to actually secondary creation. Because that what's happening here, there is already a universe here that said the earth was formless and desolate. That could be compared to being an unmanifest state of the earth, as also the planets exist. Bless you. They exist in the body of Vishnu, Garbhodakasha Vishnu, and become manifest later. And raging ocean, that's interesting, because we hear from the Vedas that Garbhodakasha Vishnu, the second Vishnu, fills the universe half with water. And when there is a partial destruction, so that is when, of course, the time factor also is being employed, then many of there are together 14 planetary systems, and up to, I think, 10 planetary systems are being destroyed by the water being raised. Also, the earth is being completely overflooded. Nothing is left when Brahma's night is coming. Brahma sleeps, and there's partial destruction. And when Brahma is completely finished with his lifespan, there's total destruction. So, but each night, so to speak, the universe gets to some degree flooded. So we have also this whole report in the Bible with the flood. So it makes sense to connect that rather to a night of Brahma where some secondary creation is taking place. And is that also the raging waters? Is that the Garbhodaka ocean is rather a raging ocean. It's a wild, powerful one. And Anantashesha, the snake being where Vishnu is laying on, is carrying Vishnu safely. That's also something so funny. Vishnu is so, we would say, cool, so to speak. Even he's laying on an ocean that is wild and intense, he's resting peacefully of his snake bed, Anantashesha, like being not in the slightest disturbed, but rather enjoying himself in the Yoga Nidra. And then it said in the Bible, then God commanded, let there be light, and light appeared. And if we compare that to one creation report in the third canto, there are different ones. One is coming in the line of this Anantashesha, the snake bat, as a form of Vishnu. He himself also spoke the Bhagavatam to the Kumaras. And in this report, it is explained how Vishnu at the time, when it is time to create the universe, that out of his navel the lotus comes, and it is a manifestation actually of the material desires also of the living entities. And it said the subtle object of creation is part of Vishnu's attention, and then the mode of passion becomes active, and when it is time that the creation is supposed to come, it goes through his navel, takes the form of a lotus bud, and then grows up, and the lotus bud itself it's very glowing. It's like a sun itself, and it said it evaporates and devastates all the waters of destruction. So here, if you read this and compare that, so I think there can be some connections can be made, or we can give a illustration based on the Vedic version that I think can be brought together with the creation report of the Genesis. And then the classic one is we have here that God created in 7 days many things, very cryptic. God was pleased with what he saw when the light was there, obviously, and then he separated the light from the darkness. It's a very cryptic sentence to me. So in my understanding, okay, light and darkness already, when there's light there can't be darkness, and what does it mean he separated these two things? And these are phenomena, and so it's probably a bit beyond our grasp to what that means. And he named the light day and the darkness night. Evening passed and morning came. That was the first day. Then God commanded, let there be a dome to divide the water and keep it in two separate places. And it was done. So God made a dome, and it separated the water under it from the water above it. He named the dome sky. Yeah. Evening passed and morning came. That was the second day. So we find many such descriptions which give us actually events that are massive. So many things happening in a very short, in a very small statement. So whereas in the Srimad Bhagavatam we have more details of elemental evolution, different energies that are being applied, and also sometimes intentions behind why is what created, and so we get some sense of what's happening there. Okay, let's leave it there for now. If we want later, we could go into that more, like all the 7 days. What here is maybe significant, that God decided after the second day to take a day rest. And this gives the impression that God is being exhausted from all that. In the Jewish tradition also, they take it as God gives an example. You should not just work continuously 7 days, sacred, you rest from your works. You don't do stuff all the time. We actually also have that kind of, in the Vaishnava tradition, we have this Ekadashi day, which is also meant to take yourself out a bit of the regular way of things. You don't cook so much, don't eat so much. You also fast. In the Jewish tradition, you have the Sabbath, or where you just where there are quite some regulations for what you do and don't do. But here the impression might be that God is being exhausted and has to rest. In the Vedic tradition, God is already resting and doing all that, so he doesn't need to rest from doing what he does. It's playfully done without any effort. And so therefore, the things here what are being created, when it says also the planets and all the life forms, they, in the Vedic sense, would be attributed to Lord Brahma. Because Lord Brahma is even creating the planets. Lord Brahma is creating all the life forms, of course, with the help of Vishnu, but it's his part as a secondary creation. So in that sense, we can, if you simply look at the Genesis, we could compare it to the secondary creation report and mainly to the personality of Brahma that way. All right. Okay, closely followed by the creation is already the destruction, which comes just a chapter later or two, also in the same first book of Moses. And there we have the story of Noah and the famous, I would say in English also, Ark, the Ark of Noah, this huge, the big ship. There was also, some years ago, they made a rather modern, quite impressive movie about it, the Ark of Noah. Background is God created humans, and first, as I said, this is the sentence that often follows: God created something, he saw it is good, which means he was pleased and therefore may it be like this. So that and then God apparently didn't anticipate that there's the capacity of evil or disobedience within the human beings. And there's also mention of gods, that there are humans, not in the creation itself, but when the dissatisfaction of God is being explained, then there's also mentioned that there have been gods, like they're explained as not humans, but they're rather divine creatures who tended to mix with the women of mankind. They saw the daughters of humans were beautiful, and so they were desiring them, and said from there the or what's the English term, reason, those huge, let me shortly Look at that. Giants, giant living entities, they are being created from the combination of these gods and human beings, human daughters. And then he also saw, okay, then God gave some regulation. He wasn't so pleased with that. But also human beings, they became evil in many ways, and they, as they maybe did now, exploited simply the creation, disobeyed the laws of God, and so on. So God, according to the Bible, became so regretful and so disturbed that he decided to destroy all of his creation practically. The only people he considered still fit to exist was Noah, his wife, and his children, his family. So he turned to them and declared that he decided that he will destroy the whole creation. And still, he planned obviously for it to continue at some point. So Noah had the mission of preservation, so to speak. He was instructed in detail of how to build the ark, and also how to together from all species, a male and a female, collect all kinds of seeds and stuff, so that everything is there in the Ark of Noah. And that when he was finished, that he said from 7 days on, then the great flood will come. And there also are concrete numbers where God says he will let it rain for, just give me a second. I think it was 40 days or 90 days, or like 40 days, 40 nights. I thought I kept it here. Yeah, 7 days. However, this can still be read. There is a certain number, like how many days it rains and how many nights. And then the flood came, of course, and then we have this what is called a cataclysm. So we find, if you connect that to the destruction reports that come in the Vedas, there's also floods, obviously, like because Garbhodaka Vishnu raises the level of the Garbhodaka ocean. At the same time, Anantashesh, the snake form, manifests a lot of heat from the fire coming out of his mouth. So all the creatures of the planets, whoever is capable by mystic power, they might elevate themselves to the higher planetary systems. There's Mahaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka, Brahmaloka. These four, from Mahaloka to Satyaloka, they remain intact. But everything below that at Brahma's day becomes destroyed by the flood. So then again, when the flood is being, when the water is withdrawn, creation can take place again. So here can also we see, can make a connection to the biblical stories, like that there's a great cataclysm, like a flood destroys everything, and then things start anew. And there's a very similar story also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, close to the story of Noah. Someone of those who are there, is someone aware, has a clue what could that be, what avatar might relate to? I give you a hint. This avatar is closely connected to water.
Ooh, is it the Matsya, the fish?
Exactly. This Matsya Avatar, there's the, yes, Matsya, perfect. There's a story in the 8th chapter, because there's also about the destruction of the universe, and the story is there that there was a king. In different ages, the Matsya story goes a bit different, because in each day of Brahma, or like even Kalpas, like there is a bit different situation. One story is that Brahma, once before he falls asleep, the Vedas slip out of his mouth, and the great demon Hayagriva is stealing them. And then Vishnu, since the flood has already been started, because when Brahma becomes tired and goes to sleep, this kind of simultaneously happens. And then Matsya kills the demon Hayagriva, rescues the Vedas. And there's another story in another age where Vishnu wanted to please his dear devotee king Satyavrata. And King Satyavrata was living, I think, also in the Satya Yuga. And he made a vow he will only sustain himself or maintain himself by drinking water. And he also went always to a river at that time and performed some austerities. And one of these austerities is you offer, like some of those, you offer Ganges water to the Ganges, you offer the river like that. And he also performed some rituals like this. And then he found within his hand suddenly a small golden fish with a horn, like a unicorn. He had that. And he was about to throw that fish right back into the river when the fish started to speak and say, King, why don't throw me back into this water? I have natural enemies here. They will simply eat me. And the king is described, he was very pleased or like enjoyed himself, seeing himself as a protector, as a king, because Kshatriya, protecting from harm, that's his nature. So he thought, okay, I give shelter to the fish. And he had a small water pot where he placed the Matsya, the fish, in there, took him also home to his palace. And next day, it so happened the fish grew significantly so that the water pot was too small for him. And he spoke to the king saying, well, this is now too small. Please give me something bigger. And then the king placed, King Satyavrata placed the fish into a well. But then in a matter of seconds, minutes, the fish turned again way bigger and said again, oh, please give me some more suitable place to stay. This is too small for me. So it took him out of the well and threw him into a lake. So also there, the same thing happened. The fish said, give me into some reservoir of water that will not decrease. So he found the most large lake and threw Matsya in there. Same thing happened. By now we might wonder, how did the king manage to carry that fish? I don't know. It's a mystical thing, how he somehow was able to transfer that fish. It was larger than a huge lake, and had mystic powers. I guess at that time the size of human beings were different. So he threw him into the ocean. And what did the fish say? The same thing like what he said when he was very small. Don't throw him into the ocean. Here, very dangerous sharks. They could eat me. So please protect me. And then the king was very bewildered, saying, what's happening here? What is this? Who is this fish? And then he also asked the fish who he is. And gradually it dawned to him, it became aware, that must be Vishnu in his form. Then also Vishnu spoke to him and explained to him. He said also, it's again the same number, 7 days from now on, all the worlds will be flooded. So also Noah was informed after he built the ark. Of course, that is not the story of how Matsya is angry with the creation, but still 7 days. So we can see some connection. 7 days from now on, the earth will be flooded. But here the difference is he didn't ask him to build an ark. He also asked him, please assemble together from all species, male, female, bring all kinds of seeds and grains and so on. Plus there will be 7 sages, he said, they will also be there. And I will send you a ship. So Vishnu, Matsya himself was saying, I provide a ship for you on which you can be then safely travel with me on the oceans of devastation. He said the 7 sages will be the light because they will be very effulgent. And he also said, I will with the king of Nagas, Vasuki, the king snake, that will be the rope connecting the ship and myself, because Matsya has this horn, and on there the snake will also be, they will combine the two, and Matsya will carry them through the waters of devastation. He says for the whole night of Brahma. But we know, hey, this is a long time. And then it is explained, actually what Vishnu did, he just made Brahma shortly take a nap. It was actually a day of Brahma. It was going also back to the curse of sage. I don't know if it was Agastya Muni, someone cursed Manu, that during his time of reign, there will be even a short devastation, which is unscheduled. Right, so Vishnu made Brahma tired, and that he took a small nap, and that the devastation can happen. And for that smaller period of time, King Satyavrata could travel on this boat, like the Arke, we can call it Arke Satyavrata. There he was traveling, and during that time, it is said Vishnu, the form of Matsya, instructed the king or in Vedic knowledge, so that the king became fully enlightened about the nature of Vishnu, and that's the glorious pastime. So then, of course, then after Brahma's nap, everything got in place. So it was, I don't know how many years this took, the nap of Brahma. But here it shows how Vishnu is rather lovingly dedicated to his devotees. And although there is also connection to the anger of Vishnu, because we hear in the Bible, God was very angry and therefore destroyed the creation. And actually we hear that thing also in the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that Ananta Shesha, the snake carrier of Vishnu, that he at times he gets angry with the conditioned souls. Why? Because if they don't take advantage of the creation and become Krishna conscious, use that facility of human life to go back to Godhead, he gets angry with them because they spoil the human form of life. They say they waste this form, then he destroys that. And I have the quotes. I can provide you with some quotes here. Yes, it said at the time of devastation, when Sri Anantadev desires to destroy the whole creation, he gets a little angry, it said. He manifests some sort of anger. And from there, like following that, between his eyebrows, the three-eyed Rudra is being manifested. And is described, actually, he instructs Rudra, this form of Shiva, how to destroy, or like how to dance the dance of creation, devastation. Yes, and so he manifests Shiva to destroy the creation. And a bit later it is said, Sri Shankarshan is an ocean of unlimited spiritual qualities, and therefore is also called Anantadev. Between him and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no difference. And for the benefit of all living entities in this material world, he remains in his realm, and he withdraws, or like how to say, controls his anger and his impatience. So he said becomes impatient, and Srila Prabhupada uses a phrase, if the souls do not close their business as conditioned souls. So if we just keep maintaining this false identity of material nature and still try to exploit everything and become or stay in illusion, he becomes angry as a, how to say, pedagogic measure. Like later in some schools, there's still time to, there is rectification by, or chastisement verbally, and it might also be a slap or the stick, so that people get aware something is wrong, do something, or don't do something. So similarly, we might see that he destroys the creation by reminding the souls, don't do that, like I take this toy away, because you don't use it the way it was intended to. So a bit like that. And Srila Prabhupada explains, this is in the 5th canto, 25th chapter, that Anantadev's main task is that to destroy the material creation. But he controls his anger and unwillingness, and to be tolerant with the conditioned souls. The material world, sorry, I have to just translate it, I have it in German here, is being created in order to give the souls again a facility to go back home, back to Godhead. But the most of them don't use that opportunity. And when the first creation has been done, they again tend to their old tendency to lord it over material nature. And this way of acting of the conditional souls angers Anantadev, and he wants to destroy the whole material creation. But because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is kind and generous to us and represses his anger and unwillingness. And only from time to time, he gives space to his anger and destroys the material world at scheduled intervals at these particular times. So we see also there is anger of God, and what leads to create destruction of the material world, but still it's in a different context. You know, we have much more information about the transcendental personality of the Lord. Yes, so let's have another window for possible comments or questions?
So probably on that last point you made, that, Prabhupada said that essentially, Krishna is very merciful, so he takes those intervals to kind of create that destruction. So do you see things like, all these, I don't know, if wildfires, these kind of disasters, natural, or things like coronavirus, do you kind of see that in a similar way? Because I think I read somewhere, I think in another presentation or something, this coronavirus, all these, the tsunamis and everything, it's also again part and parcel of Krishna. So do you see that as similar to the little flood that was created, or is it something different?
If you ask me particularly flood in regards to the Matsya Avatara pastime, as far as I understand from Shastra, this is more of a favor of Vishnu toward his devotee, that he creates an opportunity that he can witness the destruction. Whereas what we heard now about Anantadev is more the regular thing that happens. And there's also description that there are 3 types of devastations. One is this by time, the other by Anantadev, and I think the third one based on our activities. It said that our karmic reactions, they also cause destruction. As we understand, we're being instructed that our activities have consequences. Particularly if we act destructive, we earn destruction. And even if we don't have direct understanding why a particular result comes to us, a destructive result in form of a disease, in form of an earthquake, in form of a famine or whatever, still the logic is there is a cause that relates to me, otherwise it wouldn't happen to me. That would be the logic. The problem often is we don't see the cause, therefore we often can't accept the result. So it takes a bit of a more introspection and also humility to understand that not everything is laid open to me in terms of timeline. One exactly did what happened, and therefore this result comes now. It's the overview is difficult. We don't have to, this would be simplistic to have, because everything is very complex, and in some things you have partial responsibility, and some things full responsibility. Sometimes you have been passively involved, sometimes you have been actively involved in something. There's collective karma. There's so many things that come together, but the attitude of a Vaishnava or devotee is whatever happens is justified, and I don't even get only a small portion. If I'm a Vaishnava devotee, I said, Krishna gives me also that. A conditioned soul simply might receive, who is not a devotee or not turning to God, is practically carrying the full load of karmic reaction and gets the full burden. And that can be extreme, of course. It's not about just I break my arm or someone steals my wallet. It might be way more devastating than that, like in war circumstances. Now we had just also in Croatia, I heard like a huge earthquake, people lost just everything, and the whole whatever collapses, So that's quite drastic. Yeah. But it goes back to what we just heard.
Thank you.
All right. I think also in time we have reached our 90-minute time frame. If there's any last comment or question, we can take that in. And today also we covered all we wanted to cover. That's nice. Then thank you everyone for participating in that, in the third part of our Pastime of Creation series. I'm looking forward to the fourth. You will be informed when and how that happens. Yes, that would be from my side it. And then I wish you still a nice Sunday and a good start again tomorrow. I assume most of you also got to work either at home or going out, depending what your job is. And then wish you a Krishna conscious 2021. Stay in Krishna Katha, and let's encourage each other to remember Krishna in whatever way. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your time. Hare Krishna.